Hoppa. So, reporting. What's the story? And then afterwards, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to demo a bit more with some data sets that I use quite often. What's the story? Any map can tell a story. And sometimes the story is, in this case, the story has developed the map instead of the other way around. And sometimes you can use the map to tell a story. One of the things that you really need to do is to know for who you are making this map. Know your audience is so important. What we've seen with the assignment that we gave you is that some of you take the assignment really to heart and they have a look at, okay, this is interesting. I want to see how water and housing collide with each other through time. And they tell the story about that. And some of you have used it more as a assignment to get to know the software and get to know the data and just put a lot of data in and make some nice maps, but there's no story. So in this case, if you do something for an assignment, then you might want to think, okay, so what does this teacher want of me? And think a bit about that. So know your audience. And then the next thing is, okay, I know my audience, but what message do I want to bring? And if you know that, if you know the message, for example, you want to say that, okay, this is interesting because in this area, building took place only in a certain point in time, certain era. If that is your message that you want to bring across, that means that you need to deliver that specific area to your audience. And then, so if you do know what you want to bring across, then the next thing is the technique, and it is how you do it. So let's give a few examples. For those of you, it is an example I used more, so it might be that some of you know this already. This is land use in the Netherlands, in the Randstad, in the western part of the Netherlands. Sorry for those of you who are from outside this area. Yes, you're Netherlands too. So what we're looking at here is and I have a very simple kind of a legend here. If you see red, it means it's built-up area. If it's purple, it's industry. And if it's green, then it's, well, it's green. And green could be light green, which is our fields, the weilanden, or could be dark green, which is more forest. Another green here is natural park. And there's, of course, there's a yellow here for the dunes, but okay, let's not take that into account. So here we have it. This is how this part of the Netherlands looks. Well, maybe not so. For example, some of you have been researching the Westland area, and in Westland you see that there's some villages or small cities, how do you want to call them? But there's also a lot of greenhouses, and greenhouses are a specific kind of green. They're very light green, but if you go there, you find that it is you don't have the feeling that you're in a green area. It might be greenhouses, but it's not. So it's more like greenhouses are more like a light industry. So let's change the map color a bit. So it's not industry, but it's more pinkish. It's not as heavy as this one. Okay. And you see that here in this area, we call this the Westland. This is also called Oostland. And in Oostland, there's also a lot of greenhouses. And and actually there's a few more here. There's greenhouses everywhere. So this is a different story. But I can make that different because, you know, the area that we're really proud of here we have the green heart here. So what is the green heart exactly? You could say green heart, yeah, that's farming. So that's It's business, it's agribusiness, it's basically, it's just one big business park. It's agricultural business park. So it shouldn't be green, it should be more in the industry kind of thing. Now that gives a different story to that. Now, if we go one step further, we could also say that, and let's combine these things a bit. We could also say that yeah, we have nature and we have business. And then we have industry, which is a bit heavier, and it's most of it is built-up area anyway. So we changed the mapping again, the map legend, and you see this one. And you see that the built-up area and industry is all in red. Nature is in green. Dunes are in yellow, and agribusiness is just grayish. I mean, it's kind of the default option here, you know. So we were looking at the same data in all those 4 maps, but the way the story goes, it's different. And if you compare these 2 maps, the first map and the last map, it is, if you look at those maps, you see a completely different map. You see a different story, but you're looking at the same data. It is just the way that we're using the data, and we're symbolizing the data and coloring the data that tells the different story. But it is the same data. And depending on which message you want to bring across, you can use, yeah, one of the options that you have. This is something where we have to be very careful as well, because this is also, if you tell a story with data and you color the data for these purposes, that is what we call manipulating. But manipulating, the original meaning of the word is it to naar je hand zetten, to set it to your own needs and your own hand. That's the manipulating. So it's not always bad. It's just that it has a very negative connotation at this moment. But you can do this with your data just by changing the categories and the classes and etc. Talking about that, we're going back to one of the examples that you have. I see someone coming up. Is there a question coming up as well? Oh no, sorry. One of your data sets, and that is, I did now with, what I did in Green Heart was the changing categories and coloring the categories. You could also make a graduated color out of this. And here you see an example of one of your work again with graduated colors. And you see it has 4 classes with different years of construction. And this makes me wonder, and I'm not into this building period thing, but it makes me wonder why these threshold values were chosen. Like 1925 and 1967 and 1984, those are the values that were picked to change the classes. So if I would look at this map, my first question would be, why is this map maker putting the class borders there at that specific point? It could be that there is some meaning to that. Most of the time, when I'm looking at maps, I think, what could be the meaning of this? So it's, it might be that these are important years for this specific area. I don't know, but it might be. And those kind of things I'm looking at. But sometimes it's you know, if it could also be chosen randomly by QGIS, because QGIS, if you say I want 4 classes, it will just give you 4 classes. And but these are things you have to really think about, because it can bring a different message. For example, if this is all, this whole area here is all built between, let's say, 1980 and 1990, then it would fall in 2 classes here. But from a urbanism perspective, this is one building area, perhaps. That might be interesting. So that is the classes. There's also the choice of color ramp. In this case, you see a color ramp in the reds. This is what we call a gray value map or a choropleth. And that means that it is within one color, it becomes more saturated. So basically, if I talk about a choropleth map or grayscale map, this is a grayscale. It's levels of darkness and it's interesting. I find it from an aesthetics point, I kind of like this. I think the aesthetics of the map are nice. However, I'm not looking at aesthetics at this point. I'm looking at meaning. And then this would be weird because red always is a warning color. It's kind of a danger color. So this is the level of danger that is growing. So if you have sand, that must be the most dangerous part of this area. That's interesting. So here again, always make your choice of color ramp and make your choices knowingly. Don't just do random stuff. Random stuff is fun and gives you new insights sometimes in the data because you're looking at it in a different way, but it is for your own research to change colors a bit and see what happens. And then maybe at some point you say, okay, now I know what I'm looking at, and now is the time to make a more definitive legend. So this is, and I must say again, I find it aesthetically pleasing. It's a bit cartoonish, I would say. I see a raised hand. Marloes.
Yeah, I had a question about manipulating those maps, because I'd like to do it in Illustrator so that it aligns well with the rest I'm doing drawings. Yep. But I find it hard to export it to an Illustrator file, because if I try to export it to DXF, it tells me that the file is not writable, and I don't really know what that means.
Yeah, I've been looking at it. I want to change to the end, but I want to answer that with an example at the end of the demo. But my experience, and I've done a few things with a designer when we were developing 3D printed maps, and his main tool is Illustrator, and my main tool is QGIS. So yeah, we had this same problem. Most of the time, what worked best was that I made a PDF at the end. Yep. So my final map was a PDF map, and in Illustrator, the PDF, all the different items with different coloring came out nicely in Illustrator.
So, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You should export it as PDF.
Yeah, I tried SVG as well, Scalable Vector Graphic Export.
Yeah, me too.
But SVG is developed by Adobe, but they don't support it wholeheartedly anymore. QGIS is, it's running wild with SVG. All symbols are SVG, and everything that you do with vectors is SVG. But Adobe kind of lost the touch there, I guess, a bit. Or maybe QGIS made up some new stuff that, whatever. Okay, but PDF works fine 99 out of 100 times. It's just that, for example, the contours on objects, the contours, if in QGIS it looks nice, it could be that in Illustrator all the contours are like this wide.
Yeah.
So you have to set that back, but that is, you can do that with a large number of layers at the same time, I guess. But you have to find a good workflow for that. But PDF worked best.
And not writable, we can show that as well. You have to save it in a specific way. You have to click, and you have to make sure to write down the file name, not in the first window you get, because then there's no file. You have to go deeper to the directory where you want to have the file,
The browse
then make the
content.
file name, the browse to it, and then make the file name, and then do it. But you cannot type in the first window. This is for me some kind of bug in QGIS, and it's very annoying because you have to go deeper and deeper every time to make the file first, and then you can save it. And otherwise you get this issue, this error.
Yeah,
but we will show that.
Yeah, but the thing is, with if you just enter a name for a file there, what happens is that it will automatically guide you to the binary directory of QGIS, I think, and that is non-writable. So you're not allowed to write at that specific location, and some people find that extremely irritating. And from an educative point of view, I think that is an excellent choice, because it makes you think every time, where do I want to save this data? And it helps you structure your data, because otherwise you'll end up with data everywhere on your hard drive somewhere. I wanted to show you a few things with data. I'll just take this one out again. I want to show you a few things. One of the things I'd like to show you is I've been working with a data set recently which is called Urbanism, and it's a data set. I don't know if you've seen it. It's made by the PBL, Planbureau voor de Leefomgeving. What is that? Planning Office for the Environment. I don't know what their official English name is, but they made a data set, and you can download it by province. As you can see, I just tried Flevoland because it's nice and small, and then I went to South Holland, and it's got quite a few shapefiles included here. All kinds of information, urban on the built-up area, and you could have a look at this, for example, for a whole municipality. Gem, and I'll go for the Bruto ones. Like these better. You can read all about this data set, where it is and what happens. So here you have the municipalities. Now, if I identify one of those, let's have a look. Oops, you can see what's in it. So I'll identify Delft, and you see it has some values here. This is all the combined surface of certain functions. So gezondheid or industry or health things. And woon means, well, that's living area. So the total built-up area for buildings and living is, for housing is, okay. It also has these nice indicators, the floor space index and the ground space index, and of course then the open space ratio and the number of levels. So interesting. Now here is where you think first of, for example, the, let's go to this one, style this layer. And okay, so what do we have? And there's two things here, categories and graduated. Now, what is a category? A category is something that it could be any field here, but it will take all the values in a certain field and it will make a category for the different values. So if a value is only like in the name of the municipality, if it's only one name per item, oh, okay, it looks like a colorful map.
Unique.
It's lovely. You could do exactly the same for the floor space index. That would be really, really weird. I mean, now I got a map for the floor space index of a municipality in a strange color. And it's, okay, so what does this tell me? It tells me nothing at all. And the values here, like, okay. So categorize is more for text values. For example, if you have all the municipalities in the Netherlands and you want to order them by province, and there's a field in the municipality saying in what province it is, then you can categorize by province, for example, something like that. That might be interesting. There is, in this case, there's not really something here. Nah, province number, yeah, that will be all the same. Okay, so this is not, so we have to do something with graduated stuff, and graduated, that will take the highest level, the highest value, the lowest value, and it will calculate something in between. And I think you've all been working with graduated. So let's have a look. And here you see the color ramp in red. So that means that a high floor space index will be extremely dangerous, because as I said, red is an alarming color. So we should be most alarmed in The Hague and in Westland and in Schiedam, I think this is, yep. There we should be most alarmed. Okay, now if I make a map of this and I look at the legend, it will give you 5 categories and it will give you these random values here. Oddly specific, 0.057. Like, okay, why did I pick this specific number? Now, I don't know if there are rules like in a floor space index of lower than 0.2 is very low density, or it should, I'm no expert in this field. So that means that I have to, you know, I have to look it up. So, okay, what would be normal thresholds? I could also go by the data and have a look at the data itself. And I'll do that later. First, I'm going to change this because I don't think that white to red is a good color ramp here. There's just, by the way, there's 2 nice things here. One is that I could just use this pull down to pick a color ramp. And there's a few color ramps here. And I could also get a few more here. And I could create my own one or whatever. But let's have a look. When do you use these ones, for example? From red to blue, going through yellow. This is if you have a variable that is, you know, you have a threshold value. Like for example, if you would make a map for a COVID situation now, and you would have an R of 1, R naught, and you could have over R would be red colors, and under 1 would be the greenish and the bluish colors. And you could make a map like that. That is why you use a 2-color a diverse color scheme. Most of the time when you work with numbers, it's 1 variable and it goes, it becomes, if the value becomes higher, it would be darker, and if it was more like this, grayscale. Okay, so I could do exactly the same. So this is interesting and it's nice and it's lovely. Okay, let's do the same thing for the buurten or the blocks. Now let's do buurt. If you look at the data, by the way, here, the data size. Oops, sorry. It's quite a big file already. If I go by block, it's even larger. But let's have a look at this. This is, you can handle this. If you look at the documentation for this, you can see that it only looks at really built-up area and not at the fields in between. So you see a kind of a urban fabric already here, and we could do the same thing here. We could make a graduated map of, for example, the floor space index again. Changes to, I don't know, blues, whatever. Okay, so here we have it. So you can all, now with only just this, I press this classify button and I see already a kind of a, well, how the urbanization in this part of the Netherlands is going on. 5 classes. Is 5 classes an ideal number of classes? I could have a look at the data, for example, here. Why did I pick this certain values? I didn't pick it. QGIS picked it for me because I used this mode of classifying, equal count. What does equal count mean? I can show you. I'll put the feature count on here. And there's 2,132 objects in this data set. And look at how this is they are more or less the same number. So every class has the same number of features in it. They are slightly different because sometimes one value is used, let's say 10 times. So what happens then? We cannot split them up. So they have to be together in one bin, one batch. Okay, so this is equal count. You could also do equal interval. And if you look at equal interval and you look at the values here, you see that the lowest and higher value are taken and the difference in every category is the same. So it gives you a different picture. Oh, this is something I dislike. If I zoom out, everything becomes grayish. And why is that? That is because the contours, the outlines of every object are drawn all the time. So the outlines become heavier relatively when you zoom out. Can we not change that? Yes, we can. And that is another thing I saw in a few maps, that if you have a lot of detail in your map, you have a lot of outlines that the color doesn't really show. So let's take the outline away from these objects. Now here you see the symbol thing, and this is the generic symbol. That means that every object is drawn this way, and then it gets overruled by this color ramp, and according to this value, something changes. But we can change the symbol, and it is a simple fill with a solid color and a solid line. Now let's do the stroke to no pen. Okay, different map. It looks totally empty. That is because there's one thing here. This color ramp goes from white to blue. That's, so it is a bit too white perhaps. We could change that as well. We could change the first color and change it to kind of a slightly less white blue. Okay, now you see, at least you see all the low values as well. But if you do it this way, yeah, this doesn't really work, does it? I mean, you can see that there's one block here, one neighborhood, and one neighborhood here. That, nah, this doesn't work. Equal interval doesn't work. So we'll go back to equal count again. Okay, this is better. Or is it? It depends on the message you want to get across. So data quality, mapping quality is all about, okay, where do you put your thresholds? If you have, from theory, from the rules and regulations, you have certain values that you have to respect, for example, 0.2, this is the time to change that. Put 0.2 here. You see that the upper border, the upper value here becomes the lower value here. That is because we have the class boundaries linked. This one works nice. You could add values here in the value list. Another thing you can do is have a look at the data itself, the histogram. If I load the data, you can see how it is distributed. You see there's one very high value, and then there's here. So yeah, okay, this is the distribution. Is this reasonable? Maybe. You could change this a bit. You could say, okay, everything over 1 should be in the largest bin. And then, oh, look, there's a lot of them in this category. Let's make this bulk 1 category. You could do things like this as well. But once you know your data, you can always have a look at, okay, where do I want my class borders to be exactly? Maybe 5 is too much. Maybe you should just do 3. Low density, mid density, high density. Hey, I could do that. You can change the value again, of course, but you could say here, this is low density. This is mid. This is high density. You could put anything you like here, and you see that it will come down in the legend. You will also see this one. Okay, so this is one option. So if you have this one, low density, mid density, high density, it's interesting. You could use this legend for your municipality level as well, because it has the same fields, the same value types. I could just copy this style I copy all the style categories and I paste them onto this layer. So let's first put this one on. This is the layer. Now let's paste this one in, because you can see that it immediately changes then. So now we have a map which says low density, mid and high density. So most of the municipalities here now are seen as low density, including Rotterdam. It has a really low density according to this map. And The Hague has mid density, and then there's a few others, but that's it. Okay, so if you copy the rules from a neighborhood, which work really nice on a neighborhood, and you copy the exact same legend to a municipality, it doesn't work that way. On different levels, you have to revalue your legend again, because this would be kind of weird, wouldn't it? For example, here, what we have here, Capelle aan den IJssel is heavier. It by the audience would say, okay, so this is where your main city is, and here is the area around it, and I'm pointing at Rotterdam now. So this would be strange. It's a strange result for this map. Okay, so picking your class borders, your threshold values is extremely important. Stefan, anything to add to this or questions that you've seen?
Well, one of the questions which always comes up when I look at this type of data, specifically Rotterdam, because the harbor is in this municipality area, what I would like to do is immediately take out the city center of Rotterdam and use that separate from the harbor area, because the harbor area is influencing this result now. Can you say anything about that? Because that's a bit about manipulating data. Maybe use this neighborhood data to come with new values, with new clusters.
Well, of course you can, and what you could do is, for example, use use another data set to add this data. But as I said, the PBL has done this for a number of areas. So looking at wijken or gemeente or buurten, those are the units, and you always have to find the units that you want to work with. Municipalities are a very strange unit, because everywhere in the Netherlands, municipalities include the city or the combination of villages or whatever, and the area around it. And they're very heterogeneous areas. They're not homogeneously spread, that all the housing isn't. So yeah, I would go for the lowest level of detail and started working my way up from there.
Yeah, so it's important to know what's in there and to have a look at the data and the outcomes. What does it mean? Yeah, not just make the map and then say this is it. Okay. I think it will be interesting to also move to the other visualizations we discussed yesterday. You did for the glass houses. Yeah. Because then that might be something usable to give a different image of what's happening with the density.
Yeah. Yeah. For example, here, by the way, this is if you just look for this data set, you'll find there's a lot of documentation on this data set as well. So that will help you, and but this will help you to see how the data is made, why it is made, and how you can use it best.